If you've left a narcissistic relationship, you understand what happened, you can see the manipulation, you can identify the red flags, but yet you still feel shame, this video is for you. When my narcissistic relationship ended, I felt a lot of different emotions, and anger was the primary emotion. Until I started to dive deeper and realized that it wasn't anger, it was actually shame. In this video, I'm going to explain how shame forms within narcissistic abusive relationships and why it lingers. The first thing that we have to do is understand what shame is. So shame is viewed as a public emotion, the feeling that your flaws have been exposed. And narcissistic relationships are structured around that subtle exposure. We have to understand that shame was conditioned into the relationship right from inception. Gaslighting, criticism disguised as feedback, moving goalposts, withholding approval, public embarrassment masked as jokes, and invalidation framed as honesty. Over time, as we experience these dynamics in the relationship, we start to create a limiting belief. If something feels wrong, it must be me. Then we begin to over-explain, over-apologize, over-function, and over-correct. You begin to adapt. You try to stabilize the relationship thinking that that is going to stabilize yourself, but it doesn't work out that way. This adaptation starts to create self-blame, which then starts to shift into shame. So when the relationship ends, the shame just doesn't disappear because of that limiting belief that was conditioned into us. And unfortunately, shame just doesn't come from the relationship. It gets amplified by the whole world around you. We live in a culture of grandiosity. Marriages are supposed to be forever. Divorce is framed as a failure. Endurance is praised. And leaving is questioned. I remember when I made the decision to leave my relationship due to the emotional abuse that I was enduring, many people in my family circle were actually quite surprised. And the narrative became, why don't you just continue? Or is it really that bad? Another message I often got was, all marriages are like this. You just need to learn to accept it, which is wild. Why would you want to accept that kind of treatment? But most people don't understand narcissistic abuse. That external invalidation layers on top of the internal gaslighting. Now you're just not doubting yourself. You're embarrassed. Embarrassed that you chose this person. Embarrassed that you stayed for as long as you have. Embarrassed that your relationship was not Instagram perfect. And embarrassed that it ended. You start to feel like a failure. And for professional women, there's often an added layer. How can I be so competent in my career but fail in my marriage? That is something that I often felt. Before we continue, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Cassandra Mullick. I'm a therapist and wellness coach. On this channel, we explore ways to heal from narcissistic or emotionally abusive relationships. If you're interested in more support, I'm building a community for professional women on how to rebuild yourself after these types of relationships. Check out the link in the description below. Now, not only does society help us to feel more shame, we actually may gravitate more towards the feeling of shame than the feelings of grief over the relationship. Shame says, I should have known. Grief says, I loved someone who couldn't love me well. Shame keeps the illusion of control. If I would have known better, the relationship wouldn't have turned out the way it is, and therefore I am to blame. If it was your fault, maybe next time you could prevent it. Grief, on the other hand, requires self-compassion and surrender. It requires admitting that you had hope, you gave a lot in the relationship, you believed, and you invested in it, and it didn't work out. After the relationship ends, those attachment bonds just don't dissolve. Intermittent reinforcement wires the brain for longing. Stress bonds create emotional memory loops, and trauma bonding creates confusion between relief and love. So when you miss them and you replay special moments that you've had together, because we know that not every moment was terrible, shame starts to show up to explain. But what's really happening is attachment reorganization. And as we lift the shame, grief will be allowed to emerge. Shame hits your identity. Your identity is built on competence. You are the reliable one, the responsible one, the emotionally intelligent one, the one who figures things out. Narcissistic abuse destabilizes your view of yourself, especially when it comes to your competence. So when you leave and look back, shame sounds like, how did I tolerate that? Why didn't I leave sooner? How can I have had children with this person? But in reality, those questions assume that you were in a stable, healthy relationship. And frankly, you weren't. You were operating in a dysfunctional dynamic and were thrown into survival mode. When our competency is attacked, when we are building negative narratives around ourselves due to the relationship, shame can also push us into the shadows. When you feel ashamed, you don't tell people the whole story. And I'm guilty of that. I didn't for a very long time. You may soften it, you may minimize it, or you may say, it just didn't work out. Because explaining narcissistic abuse is exhausting, and you don't want to be judged by your experience. People love to put in their own input of what you should have, could have, would have done. But we have to be careful here because isolation increases rumination, rumination increases shame, and shame increases silence. And that cycle keeps you stuck. Feeling heard and having a community interrupts shame. It's important to know that shame doesn't decrease because of self-punishment. It dissolves through connection and integration. We need to learn what happens psychologically to us, how to rebuild self-trust, and how to reconnect with our own internal signals. The goal here isn't to erase the experience because we've lived it and we can't go back and change it. The goal here is to experience some post-traumatic growth. If you're interested in finding a community all about rebuilding identity, dissolving shame, allowing grief, and experiencing post-traumatic growth, check out the link below in the description. If you'd like to learn more about building self-trust, check out this video up here.